was just launching into it. Moira Deeming, thank you for coming. Welcome to Adelaide, by the way. Early flight, but we only do early flights here. There's 8 a day, so no, that's not true. I just made that up. You're sitting on the Based podcast, and we invite people who are based. And you are, if anyone is based, you are based. So welcome. No one's had a baptism of fire. It's been a baptism of fire. So, what are your impressions of politics so far?
Very different to what I expected. Yeah. So I knew a few upper house MPs before, and when I was asking people who might like to work for me, I was saying, look, you'll be really bored. I'm so sorry. You might be able to do some study on the side. And as far as I could see, it's a bit of a boring job, but I need people that I can trust and that are organised. And they constantly remind me about the false advertising that I do in terms of employing them, because it's the
It should have had roller coaster ride written on the application, yeah. And what about your background is an interesting one, because you've said before you come from a long line of kind of Labor family. Like you've got a sort of a Labor background, probably more.
Yeah, so Labor MP, heavily unionised, Labor. On my wedding day, my mum was pretty shattered. I think I was marrying a Presbyterian Liberal, and she said, where it comes from, good Catholic Labor stock. And that's true. They were really great people, and they, I think, really represent what Labor used to be, in the heart of what unions are supposed to be, and the heart of what a centre-right kind of philosophy would be, public service. That's been huge in my family, being just doing good in society, thinking about your community. I know that I got all of that from my centre-right Labor family upbringing, and I haven't changed, but I did happen to notice as I got older, the corruption in the unions. People complain about, greedy capitalist pigs running profiteering businesses, and when I looked at the unions and how they were scraping money out of hardworking nurses and teachers' pockets and going on, tours around the world, and they had incredibly lavish salaries, and they would splash money around for one political party. I knew that was wrong. That was not right. And the fact that, you were expected to vote how they told you to, I knew that was wrong. And my family didn't agree with any of that. But there is this loyalty to the unions because they care about low-income people who don't have anyone to advocate for them, and that is so honourable, and I still believe in all of that. I just think it's really sad that the unions in Victoria have become so biased. It's just a tragedy. They've corrupted each other, the Labor Party and the unions.
The whole discussion about that, I reckon, about what's happening to the pendulum of politics, and I say it all the time in Canberra, and I think we are now the party of the workers in many ways. It's, we are now the ones looking out for, that constituency that used to be Labor's heartland, and I think it completely turned on its ear. The left of politics, if you like, is now the establishment, and the right has sort of swinging the other way in many ways. It's just it's quite fascinating from a political point of view how that's all happened.
It came into focus for me in terms of how, people talk about big government, and I don't think that really hit home for me until I realised that big government is not lovely welfare and tweaking little things, forcing people to share a little bit more. If they're a little bit selfish, it's the removal of parental rights, it's the removal of bodily autonomy, it's the removal of your freedom to associate. That is not what ordinary centre, right, or left people believe in. I don't recognise the Labor Party at all.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the people that I know in the Labor Party that would have similar views are now entirely marginalised. And in fact, I find here in South Australia, they're the ones that get marched out to deliver the leftist message. Often there'll be something that's happened, or one of our people will send a letter saying, we want to do this, and the person they'll send out almost marching them down the plank is the person that's kind of would be traditionally a DLP Labor type. So it's almost the left of the Labor Party are now well and truly in control, and we're all suffering for it. All the easy underrail with these. We told him. But just back on, in terms of your childhood, you grow up in a sort of a community-based kind of family that were kind of interested in these issues with it. Was stuff politics talked about over the dinner table? or was it more innate than that?
I think I just grew up watching people serve others, and especially in the role of the union. So my mother worked, in the union industry with nursing. So she was with the Australian Nursing Federation and things like that. And I just grew up surrounded by very, very powerful, very articulate, very highly paid, very confident women on the left. And they were good women. They weren't asking for the kinds of things that Labor now advocates for, and that I don't see enough of a fight being put up for in our side of politics.
Yeah, and in terms of how you first sort of got a concept of politics being something you might want to pursue. You obviously had a career in teaching. When was the fire lit?
I had no intention of getting into politics. My husband was the political one. I just wanted to be a teacher and a mother. And, politics barged its way into my life. My husband was always political, always wanted to be a member of the Liberal Party, and wanted to help. He wanted to find good MPs to help. He really got it far earlier than I did, about how important it is not just to vote for a political party, but to get to know the candidates, to be involved, to help choose those candidates, to be a member of the party and help to steer it, and to keep them accountable to the values they say they're representing. I get that now. But I still didn't want to be an MP. It was just, as a teacher, I started hearing about the Safe Schools program, and I thought, no, people are just being a bit hysterical. That cannot be the truth. That's illegal. We aren't allowed to do that kind of thing. We're teachers. We know what child safeguarding is. But then over the course of a few years, I just had an opportunity to look into a few pieces of curriculum, and it absolutely destroyed my trust in the government. It destroyed it. I was shattered, absolutely shattered. This was unacceptable that they had hired people who advocate for what they call child sex rights, which, as far as I could tell, to like legalizing. I refuse to call it sex with children. It is raping children. I just can't believe that they would advocate for that. In the paper, they haven't retracted it, and they were involved at all in the design of our curriculum. I know that sounds hysterical to people, but I have the resources if you really want to check it up. And I just couldn't believe that. And so I was raging around the house for 3 days, and, my husband's like, look, we didn't do it, Moira. Like, write an article. And I think that's where it started. That went viral. Being a teacher, I was just going around trying to get people to understand what the law was. So look, politics barged its way into our life. I think my husband saw from very early on that he thought that I should go into politics. So I just kept on saying, no. Just find me a good candidate and I'll support that candidate. I just want to be a teacher. But I just kept going. I just kept on not being able to stay silent. I just couldn't resist. I could not stay silent. And so got onto council. And I got onto council on first preference votes in a dead red area with I think someone nagged us about putting out flyers. I didn't do a single post up. I just had a Facebook site, and people were looking at that. And I had said, I don't agree with taxes being spent on for clean story time for children. I don't agree with biological males being able to access female-only spaces like toilets and change rooms. I don't agree with dealing with issue, with promoting cancelling Australia Day or things like that, or any fringe issues. Money should be spent on the basis of need. End of story. And even in the western suburbs, where every single lower house seat is Labor, and very convincingly Labor, I got in on first preference votes alone. And then once I was in there, and I was reading more documents and finding even more scandals, and I don't know, I've just been pulling this thread, and now I'm in politics.
And there it is. Interesting how many times I hear that. There's a phenomenon in the US, which is mums getting involved, probably Mums for Liberty, and just people like Kari Lake, and they talk about the mama bears, and I keep saying it over here to people, don't muck around with the mums. Like the mums, when they're on a roll, they will get the job done, and we're seeing that here. We've got similar sort of stories of people that just got interested in politics over a range of issues. Some of them are, a lot of them are social issues, but not always. And all of a sudden they just found themselves on this path. And to me, that's what politics is.
Yeah.
Because too often on both sides of politics, we've seen people that are just political animals becoming politicians. So whether it was unionists on the Labor side or political staffers on the Liberal side, the mission has got to be getting real people who are driven by something back into politics. I think that's the story you just articulated there.
That's right. And when I first ran to the Liberal Party, I ran in St Albans just early on. They needed someone. I said, I'll run for you. But it was very funny. All these people on the lines assumed that I was a lawyer, a Liberal starter, that I had come from Albert Park, that I lived locally, and that I didn't know anything about the local area. And they were wrong on every single front. And that means a lot to people that have been taken for granted by Labor for so long, like people out in the West, because they really have. They keep voting for Labor, and Labor just absolutely spits in their faces. And I do believe that, if we are a viable alternative, if we stand up for our own values, which actually are the values of, ordinary working class Labor, right? Their values are our values. I don't think they quite understand who we are. I know that we will win.
I keep saying, it was asked the other day, but same question. The Liberal Party speaks to its base when it speaks to its core values, and we have to enforce them. We have to make sure that they're being heard. I totally agree with that. But throughout the course of your, I guess early stages, you were in teaching.
Yeah.
Now that would you spent a decade in teaching or something before politics, a little bit over. Now tell me about that, because I'm interested in where that slide started. Obviously, you saw it with the Save Stores thing, but did you notice a bit of a drift in the curriculum prior to that? Are you noticing a sort of progressivism coming into teaching? Or
yeah, I noticed that the words that were taught to me in the classroom, like tolerance, were being replaced with inclusion, and it meant forced inclusion. People criticize us for talking about indoctrination in the classroom, as if we don't know that teaching values is a sort of a form of indoctrination in terms of you're teaching them to believe one thing over another, of course. But this is different. This curriculum, all of these curriculums and these shifts in language, they're backed up by punitive policies. That's the difference. So we used to be able to disagree, and we would tell the kids, you don't have to agree. I don't really care whether you agree or not, but you have to work together just like adults do in the workplace. You get the job done, you cooperate, you be civil, you get the job done, and you go home. But the policies, for kids having to be sent off for counselling for expressing disagreement about, gender ideology, as though they are bigots, that is indoctrination. That is not learning. That is punitive. That is just coercion. And it's just absolutely cruel. And I really have no respect for teachers that bring their political ideology link to the classroom. It was a point of pride for me that they didn't know which way I voted until I ran. And I didn't even tell them that I was running.
Now they know it.
Now they know.
But when did you start to see that shit? Because I'm the same. I can't remember teachers drifting much into politics at all when I was at school, probably a long time before you, but sadly, but certainly it was all just very, I was the same. I sort of had an idea. I didn't really understand politics at school. I thought, well, maybe that person's this and maybe that, but I never really knew. I imagine now in the schoolroom, apart from really the fact that presumably anyone who's conservative just is quiet in that environment, but I mean, there must have been a point where that kind of tipped and all of a sudden the whole thing changed, and now it became this indoctrination. I mean, that's what it looks like from the outside.
Yeah. Well, I did notice that, because the Safe Schools program was designed ostensibly to stop bullying of gay kids. And, my point was that when was the last time a gay kid got bullied? What, the 70s? I don't know. Nobody allows that. You point out a teacher or a school to me that systemically allows bullying of gay children, and I will be the first to say, fire those people, get rid of them, do something about it, 100%. But I have just never seen that. I've never seen that. That didn't even happen when I was a student. I don't even know what they're talking about. It's so late. And I thought, that's fine. And I know that some people link it with the same-sex marriage issue, but from my perspective, we already had, homosexuality was a reality in classrooms in terms of, it was talked about, I guess, not much, but we didn't talk about their sexuality really much at all. It was not pushing one direction or another. Well, what I noticed in terms of the shift was after the gay marriage vote, it wasn't the homosexuality stuff that changed everything. It was the transgender ideology. With the transgender ideology came these incredibly starkly different curriculums and policies that we had never seen before. They always said it's because of LGBTQ or whatever, but it was nothing to do with LGB. It was the T. We had never seen anything like this before. It removed every single child safeguard that we had. They brought in doctors in schools program, and I was thinking, excuse me, no teacher, for very good reason, is allowed to be alone in a classroom with a student. Why is there now some random doctor allowed to be in a classroom somewhere on this premises alone with one of my kids with a mandate to lift up their top? No, that is outrageous. That is a stupid idea. Children are at risk. You would never allow that. If any teacher was alone in a room with one of my students, I would barge in and say, how you going? What's going on here? To help the teacher, even if they got trapped alone in a classroom with a kid. I just couldn't believe it. They started to bring in all this erotic sexuality. They started talking about children, like they needed to know about erotic sex. I was thinking, I'm not a madam in a brothel. I'm happy to talk about, where babies come from. I'm happy to talk about consent. I'm happy to talk about sex in a generic kind of way that's not going to humiliate the children. It's not going to impose and remove their boundaries and their right to privacy. These curriculums ask them questions they need to divulge, sexual experiences that they've had, that they're willing to have. They need to learn about, erotic sex acts. And I just think this is so inappropriate. There's a term for this already. If you did this in a staff room, I would complain and I would win that I was being sexually harassed.
And it does feel like a phenomenon. It feels like and from the outside, it's hard to see where it started and how it became a phenomenon. But we're now seeing it in books. We've got, a couple of notable cases locally of public libraries stocking books. And we did a bit of work on this during Classification Board during Senate estimates. And, to me, the laws surrounding classification in libraries are woefully inadequate. So there's this big gap in the market. It's almost like the system didn't see this coming. It was sort of push on the kids, and so I don't know where it goes, but I know we've got to fix it. And it's
if the Department of Education lowers their standards to the point where it can say human beings are erotic sexual creatures and their sexuality starts when they're born and only ends when they die. I remember that sentence. It does not start when they're born. There's only one category of people who think that anybody who is a minor is sexual. And we rightly think of them as having criminal intent. That's our Department of Education. That our legislation has allowed this. It's promoted in the policies. They pretend it's anti-discrimination. That's rubbish, and then I see that libertarians are saying, stop it with the book burning. This isn't about book burning. This is about doing no harm to children. So look, I just think we need to get some decent standards back in society and not shy away from them or be ashamed of them.
What percentage of people do you think would agree with that out in the big wide world?
I don't even think I've ever met someone who does disagree.
99%. It's just interesting because one of the things that always strikes me when I walk into the building of Parliament is that it feels like an alternate universe. Like it feels like a great big bubble where the sorts of things you take in your own mind and you try to prosecute in that environment are not the sorts of things that people are talking about in that bubble. And it almost makes you feel like you're the one that's lost their mind. Speaking in favour of I think it was One Nation actually put up a motion about gender ideology and having a committee to look into it. And the pushback on the other side of the chamber, the tears and the kind of the name calling over something which was a simple and I think fairly benign investigation, and we love transparency except when it pushes against it.
You've got nothing to hide then.
Correct. So the thing I'm fascinated about is how those buildings, and I reckon this is the case all across the country, have just lost touch with the person out on the street. If you threw a dart out on the street, you'd hit someone that would agree with what you just said. But they're not sitting in our parliaments all the time. There are many good people in there, of course, but not the building, the zeitgeist of the building somehow crushes that.
Well, I do have this repeated experience where those exact people will say to me on the sly, well, I agree with you, actually. We can't say these things in public. I actually said to one of them who came in and I just looked at this woman and I said, I'm not grateful. And neither will the women and children out there be grateful when they find out that you hid behind me like a human shield and threw all of us together under the bus.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I've had a bit of that myself, I have to say. But the event. Now, this, of course, this sort of phenomenon in schooling has caused a big homeschooling movement.
Yeah.
A lot of people have jumped out. I mean, you're seeing more and more of that. You're hearing about more of the homeschooling movement. It seems to be a phenomenon now.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many benefits to it. It's just it's like a lifestyle change, a tree change, a sea change. It's a really lovely thing to do while you have children. You know, they grow up so fast. So my family, we started homeschooling our children, due to a bullying issue. We weren't, and I'm still not opposed, to schooling in a school system. Obviously I want charter schools and all these other things like America has, because I have better outcomes. And as a teacher, I can tell you, the more autonomy you give me, I'm so motivated to help those kids learn. I just need to get rid of all this bureaucratic nonsense so I don't focus on the kids. So there's lots of benefits like that. But also, it's very, very effective. It's very academically, it's very effective for their social networks and their social skills and the closeness of the family. It's so effective, even down to things like, we get to take holidays in the off-peak all the time. We took our kids, we just latched onto one of my husband's business trips overseas. We just took the kids with us. Obviously it's hard with kids, but it's fun. You have these adventures together and you're strengthened as a family unit. And, because it got to the point where I felt like I was pouring out all of my energy for other people's children who, I don't regret that. I really love serving families. I love helping kids. I'm not feeling like I'm helping create a better society by, helping look after children. But, to find out that my eldest was being bullied and that her teacher was not actually looking after her like I would have looked after other people's children, that was pretty shattering to me. And I thought, well, actually, I am her mother. I should actually be focusing on my child first and not outsourcing that necessarily but I have to. And so we started homeschooling sort of out of that crisis. But I just fell in love with it. I couldn't believe how effective it was. All the things I'd been trying at school and not, I was quite successful. I was a pretty good teacher. I had a good relationship with the parents, but I didn't learn how to teach at university. They didn't teach us how to teach. I just can't believe it. It's no wonder to me now, looking at the system, that everyone's illiterate. I get it now why they're illiterate.
Yeah, what changes it? Like what? Okay, so you're now in charge. You've got a magic wand of the education department. What do you do?
So you create almost like silos of subjects. So you do not progress just because you hit a certain age. Some kids, they're just gifted in maths, but they need extra help in English. They need to slow down in English. So you let the kids whatever age they are, if they are at this level of maths, they can go to that class. So there was a school in the CBD actually.
Maths. I was not gifted at maths.
You might have if the teacher didn't have to just keep on rolling over into the next section of the curriculum without actually checking and making sure that everyone had mastered the content.
There's nothing you so simple as that.
This is where my teacher arrogance comes in. It's like, I make that decision. I just think there's just, it's mastery or it's nothing. Yeah. It doesn't matter how old you are. You don't be ashamed of working hard and achieving mastery. It doesn't matter if it takes a bit longer. That doesn't matter.
But that would be difficult outside the scheme because part of this issue is bureaucracy. Everything that I see problems with the health departments.
Well, there was a school in the middle of the CBD that had a high proportion of migrant children. So they had English as a second language, but they were obviously perfectly bright, perfectly well educated in other subjects like science and maths, if it's a more universal kind of language. And that principal asked for permission to do that exact thing, that silo learning. So in the morning it was maths, and you went to whichever maths class you were at the same level at. Didn't matter about your age. Same with English. And all the children, not just the children with English as a second language, but all the children started to exceed expectation. And there was no shame in it. There was no shame about age. But, it was really about mastery. And that's, I can't believe it. They want to do all these things about investing in kids, with their mental health, and their self-esteem. I'm like, if you help them succeed, it will come naturally. Just help them succeed. They will know that they are smart, that they are capable, that they can fend for themselves, that they have agency over their lives. You don't just, I don't know, throw compliments at someone and hope it sticks, and they can. Do they not believe that these kids can do it? I believe they can do it. What am I being paid for if I can't help them learn to read? I don't even understand the point of anything if that's not the goal.
So we've got to talk about the rally. I want to talk about Posey Parker, Kelly Jane Keane, and so how did you get involved and know her? Did you know her beforehand? Did you sort of corresponded?
No, I didn't know her. She's a big superstar, basically. No, I just had been following her as a mum, basically, and with a couple of my friends, we would watch her shows, over a cup of tea, think about things she was saying. I didn't know her, and I heard she was coming to Australia.
And she's a women's rights speaker. Like she's a pro
and parents' rights and child safeguarding. So, like I said before, I'm not anti anyone actually, but the self-ID laws, the transgenderism as a philosophy incorporated into the law has had catastrophic impacts on women's rights, on child safeguarding, on parents' rights, and, even just ordinary freedom of speech, with false pronouns, freedom of assembly, with the anti-discrimination law and schools not being able to teach an ethos that happens to disagree with the validity of that philosophy. Everyone else is allowed to disagree with the school's not allowed to disagree with anyone else, even though apparently those special characteristics are equal in the law. Anyway, I'm getting on my Bible. So basically, people call her anti-trans, they would call me anti-trans just because we're talking about, we do talk about the transgender issue, but it's because it's decimated all these rights in the law. If it was, I don't know, a church doing it, I would say the same thing. I would be saying the same thing. Children are being medically transitioned and socially transitioned, with and without their parents' consent, without any evidentiary basis, without any concern about the fact that they are actually too young to know what they're consenting to. They're losing their sexual function. They're losing their health. I read recently in the UK that there are this new wave of, 30-something-year-old women who have had complete hysterectomies, right? So with the oophorectomies as well. So absolutely no female hormones, and they go into catastrophic early dementia. And so they're being housed in elderly facilities and being assaulted, and they have no memory. It's just catastrophic. It's a disaster. Women no longer have access to single-sex change rooms. There's all these compounding factors. Over in the West, I have this huge Muslim population. I find it extremely upsetting and offensive and unacceptable that males are allowed into my change rooms. But for a Muslim woman, that's a whole new level of seriousness for this Muslim woman. So they're reaching out to me. They're upset. I try to get an answer from the government. They just don't seem to care. They, in fact, told me that I should be teaching Muslim residents to be more inclusive. Unbelievable, isn't it? So nobody's anti-trans. We're just upset about what's going on in the law, And so Kelly J. Keane is this, she's one of the original activists on this, I would say. She was just a mum like me, actually. She's a mum of four. Yeah. She put up a sign. It's all started because she put up a sign with the definition of woman, adult human female. And predictably, she predicted that all these trans rights activists would lose their minds and, create an absolute storm in the media, which they did, which she then capitalised on, to talk about these reasonable issues like what the need to roll back these imbalances in the law to protect women's rights, to protect children, to protect parents. And that's really all it is. And we were just a couple of hundred women. We were surrounded by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of terrifying far left activists. They were threatening us with violence. They were throwing things at us. I was assaulted. I was kicked in the legs. Another woman was knocked over unconscious.
So these are the things you don't see on the news, right? These are the things. The sort of scene there was hostile. I mean, I know there's a particularly
terrifying,
nasty leftist element, particularly in Victoria.
Yeah.
almost Antifa style, for those who aren't aware of Antifa, with this kind of radical left-wing protest group. But they were there at the day and they were separated. They were, I think, off a little bit back.
Yeah, so there was a huge, about 10, 15 metre buffer zone that the police, I don't know, I got there late, but for some reason, the police had established, or there became, naturally this buffer zone that was created. Apparently there were 6 or 7 groups there on the day. Apparently there are still people who go there every month to protest the mandates and the lockdowns and things. And so I think they were there somewhere. But I just know that I thought that the very violent group of people had broken through the police lines and were coming at us when I saw them edit the masks. Well, I thought they were Antifa. But they were just hanging around very strangely, slowly on the outskirts. I couldn't.
This is the men dressed in black.
Yeah. So we didn't know that they were Nazis. Couldn't see any Nazi insignia. I didn't see their sign until later on footage. They had already had a fight with some of the other socialists. So the National Socialists were having a fight with the Nazis. Very confused about why you're fighting each other. To me, from my perspective, they look like the same group.
Yeah.
And it was a tense, very stressful day. I was the police there. Asked for it to be shut down early. I asked the security guards, to shut it down early because that's what the police would like, and because the police were worried about their safety. None of us had any idea. None of us had any idea that anyone would even dream of saying that those men who didn't come near us, who didn't stand with us, who didn't speak with us, who didn't listen to our speeches, who just sort of were trying to fight the other two groups. I don't even know why. They seemed like the same group to me. And then they were escorted out. We didn't know that anyone would conflate us with them, because that's insane. And the first time I saw them do a salute was when they were being escorted out. So look, it all came as a real shock to be conflated with people who are promoting, race-based laws when we're just talking about sex-based rights. One has nothing to do with the other. So look, it was all a bit of a shock. It was very confusing. And what can I say?
One of those things that I learned very early on is how much power there is in the media. Once they pick up on a narrative, or, once a narrative is born, how that can just take on a life of its own. I've sort of seen a bit of that myself through, various interactions with the useless news media that we have. So everywhere. But this seems to me to be that version on steroids. Like this was, it was almost like 1 and 1 equals 3, and through my feeling on this, the standard now is, well, whoever you are, wherever you are, if someone bad turns up, then you're immediately associated with that group or person, which is, if it's said out loud in an intellectually honest manner like that, is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. And yet somehow this argument was prosecuted out there. That's probably more a statement. It's probably more a rant, actually. I feel like that was a rant, but you probably don't even need to say anything about that. But I just, and somehow the cycle just allowed it to happen. I actually think that the sort of things that women who are now speaking on these issues are finding themselves exposed to are probably the same sorts of things that the suffragettes experienced 100 years prior. It's the same there would have been the same sort of visceral anger about women wanting to vote, presumably.
And they did suffer through a fair bit of violence too, of now being finding out about. And the other ironic thing about it is, for our group to be called, extreme and far right, it was mostly left-wing women. The vast majority were left-wing women. And, like the LGBT community is on my side, because they're not allowed to be same-sex attracted. They have to be same-gender identity attracted, which is heterosexual, which is the most homophobic thing I've ever seen in law ever. I know that, everyone has their idea about sexual ethics, and in a multicultural society, you're going to have people that disagree on what's the right way to manage, sexuality in a society for all sorts of different reasons, and we can all agree to disagree, and that's fine. But to see it in the law that you are not allowed to be same-sex attracted, you have to be same-gender identity attracted, I never thought that I would see that
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's so confusing. I find it very confusing, but it is literally just a bizarre sort of window we've gone into. Yet there is this sort of strange animosity for conservative women. We hear all the time from the left about, women, the sisterhood and all this sort of stuff, but there is no venom like the venom that comes from the left, female left to the female conservative, I reckon. I don't feel as though I get the same sort of vitriol, so try harder. To the lefties that are watching, probably very few. But certainly every time I see a woman who is, espousing sensible conservative principles, they get jumped on. And I can't make that phenomenon out. It's strange.
Well, so I have to defend left-wing women here because they can be.
Go on.
Oh, I think there's this elite group of left-wing women who are exactly as you described. And look, I do think that there has been an incredible amount of success in dividing women against each other, and having women who getting women to view each other as enemies if they disagree on any other issue. I think that's been very successful across our society. But I've been working with especially left-wing lesbian women on this particular trans issue for well over 10 years, just trying to join in and help because
you're right.
We agree on this. And I have to give them so much credit because they had so much distrust of me. And, a lot of it is born out of real genuine trauma. They have had real genuine horrendous experiences with perhaps conservative women or conservatives, or they've read things in the paper that were not true, but they didn't understand that they weren't true. And so it's been interesting for them to see that they have been cast as transphobic. And they said, but I'm not transphobic, I just disagree. And I say, yes. And there are people that are called homophobic who aren't homophobic, they just disagree. They don't wish you any harm. They don't. And so it's been this real amazing learning curve. And I've just built up these amazing relationships with a whole bunch of women on the left.
Yeah.
And I love them. They're politically savvy. They're hilarious.
Yeah.
And because I come from the left, I really feel actually at home with them. And I've missed it, so I love hanging out. So I let women friends. I do think it is the elite class. I do think, not to sound like a socialist, but I can't help but notice it's all these very elite, wealthy people who it's not going to impact, and who people wouldn't dare, to do these things to them. Whereas all these people in the middle class and the lower classes, and happens in their schools, no one hears about it. It gets shoved under the rug. They have no protection. They have no advocate. And so, women from every political party, we're all joining together, and they have defended me, a conservative woman who's pro-life, who's in the hated Liberal Party, they would have told me I've internalized the patriarchy before. But after getting to know me over the period of a decade, they've defended me at great personal cost. And I have so much respect for that because, it's just that nuanced view. It's a more adult view of the world,
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And I would draw like Colleen about less some of them. I would draw that. I was only joking. I do, but you're absolutely right. And in fact, I've seen that as well through my position on vaccine mandates. A lot of the people that agree with me would be people that would, as I have spoken about it before, people who would have been probably traditional green types. And having had that dialogue, here's the message, right? Having had that dialogue and a bit of ability to talk to each other, we realised there was so much common ground, and there's so much of that. In fact, even recently, I spoke to a journalist who was sort of historically from the left, and we're agreeing on everything. So
yeah,
I think we really do have to, and me included, get away from this left and right thing. It's almost a pro-human movement.
Yeah, and no, that's why I love the Liberal Party. I do think that we have the only answer to these problems, which is the freedom to agree or disagree without destroying each other's lives and ability to earn money.
Yep.
Without accusing each other of having terrible motives. Just freedom of association, reasonable freedom of speech, the reasonable, our Liberal Party values are the only answer to having a multicultural society where people are going to disagree, unless we all want to go to civil war and, get rid of everyone who doesn't agree, or you could go the totalitarian way like Labor is going and Greens and the socialists. They're just going to crush people so that they are so exhausted and so broken that they, like in 1984, they just confess to things that they don't believe, like trans women are women.
Quite right. And I mean, you've taken on some of these other issues. We're pretty outspoken about mandates, vaccine mandates, and all sorts of other things. But this is the job. The job is, there is such a unnatural disconnect between the real world and politics. I don't know why we don't have more people who can come into this and speak about these issues, because they're not dangerous. Like, the sky doesn't fall in. Even when you're going through the trauma and turmoil that you're going through, the reality is there are lots and lots of people that are with it, lots. And the media love to, in my mind, I remind them of this routinely, by the way, because I just like it. And I would consider that they love to puff themselves up as being more influential and important than they are, but I don't buy that. Or, I mean, I don't. It gets written in the paper these days. I don't even really listen to it. So people out there are not fooled. It's like there's an underground movement now of common sense, and I reckon it's the overwhelming majority. I don't know. What's been your experience? Are you finding people are, stopping you and, sort of urging you to keep going, or, what's been the experience?
Look, I mean, it's been successful in terms of the defamation. Like, there are huge swathes of society and people in my area. I just got an email this morning when I got off the plane from a community group who were very happy to have me help them until they looked up what has been said about me, and they think I got expelled because I actually did have associations with Nazism.
Yeah.
And that's just horrendous to me. Look, I think even the journalistic class, even they know this is too far on the transgender issue. They are part of that group who say to me, "Oh, quietly, I agree with you." He said, "We have this agreement with ACON, and I'm not allowed to use these," and things like that. And this is going to require courage. It's going to require people to just stand up and take the hits. And really, that's what you're right. That's what we're paid to do. We are Liberal. We are pre-selected Liberal Party MPs, and our one job is to win the argument. We are to run through that media gauntlet of ridiculous clickbait lies, and we are to stand strong and advocate for the values that we were hired to advocate for. And I just think that people have probably decided that politics is best left to the professionals, but I just think that's garbage now. Look what they've done to us. I don't care if you have no qualifications. I don't care if you're a cleaner. I don't care.
It's probably better if you are.
Right? We just need people who have conviction and aren't going to be, lost in a cloud of weasel words as if, oh no, I'm so confused because they've wedged us on this issue. It's like, it's not very confusing. Grown men absolutely should not be going into change rooms with little girls and women. It's not actually confusing. It's not hard. It's a winning argument, and it's the right thing to do.
And people are with you.
Yes. And if they were, you could win them over in under 5 minutes. Not discovered. I've never, ever had a single person that I couldn't win over in under 5 minutes. They either agree with me or they walk off in a huff, which also shows that I won.
Capitulation on the argument. There is so much more we could cover, but Mrs. Lady, thank you for coming on Based Podcast and enhancing your Based credentials, because we are now officially Based. So, Moira, thank you, and keep up the good work. Get a lot of people with it.
Thanks for having me, and well done to you on all the work that you do.
I'm just allowed about. I know there's nothing special about this. This is just shouting into the moon, I think. So,
It's having an impact.
Thanks for that. Thanks for coming. See you soon.